The only thing a publicist can offer is love. Whether you're promoting a movie or a play or a book or a band, it doesn't matter what it is. You have to care about it. You have to have a passion for it. Because if you don't have a passion for something, then you're not going to be able to transmit your enthusiasm to somebody else, to people who are journalists or anyone with a megaphone who has the ability to reach a lot of people. So you've got to love something. If you're going to be a publicist, there's got to be a lot of love in you. Now, a critic can go, I'm going to say what a movie is this movie's good, this movie's bad. The only thing I was able to do in my career was to say, I don't like this. I'm going to say no. I'm not going to represent it because I didn't know any other way. How do you call people up and say, this is something that's really good and it's a stinker? How many times can you call people up and talk to them about something when they see that it's bad? They have to have some kind of faith in you, that you have some integrity, that you have some kind of judgment. So I had to turn movies down. There was no other way. And if you're a young publicist, you might say, well, I don't have that kind of option. If my company says I have to promote something, then I just have to promote that thing and I have no control. So what I would say is maybe there's something you could find in a project that you can love. Maybe the director has potential. Maybe the film is not good enough, but she's got something. And it's possible that if this director becomes well-known, she might get the project that would really show what she could do. And that's something to get excited about if you believe in her, if you want to help her. And the film might not be the best, but the whole idea of the project could be something that you find very satisfying. And in a larger plan, I would say you might want to try and have your career follow the same kind of arc as mine has, where I largely work for myself. I've run 2 PR firms and I've been a freelancer. So I put myself in a place for probably 80% of my career where I could say yes and no. And that was very important to me, and that was essential to me. In this video, I'm going to talk about the way I did publicity, sitting at my desk in my apartment on Riverside Drive, this little job where I handled little films for little companies with a lot of freedom in how I operated. And when I worked on Desperately Seeking Susan, I loved the experience of being on a movie set. So I closed my company, and for 7 years, I traveled all over the world doing production publicity, being there for every day of shooting. And eventually, I came back and joined regular publicity again, and I discovered that everything had changed. The kind of movies that I was being offered, they were the same movies, but they were being run by movie studios. And there was a more corporate approach to it. And I discovered that the way I operated, the way I did my work, I was no longer allowed to do it. My way of working was being crushed. The heart of my work back in the day involved calling people. There was no email. The only thing I could do was to cold call people who had seen the film and talk to them. And to think a little bit about who I was before I made these calls. I had seen the film upwards of 5 times. I really knew the film well. I'd talked to the director about it. I had done a lot of research. If there's a book associated with it, I read the book. If there are other films by the director, I tried to see them. And maybe I'd seen more films by the director than the person that I was calling. So I came into these conversations knowing a lot. I like to go for a full immersion, a background thing. I used to call it jumping into the mud puddle. I like a kid throwing all this mud all over. And I just really wanted to know as much as I could because I felt that was necessary. And then I would talk to people, and I know the general idea was I was trying to find out what they thought, but it really was a conversation, mano a mano, talking. If they didn't like the film, I didn't disagree with that. I didn't try and tell them they were wrong, but I gave information. I talked about things that I knew. And you had to really calibrate what you said to a critic, because some people, it could totally backfire if they felt you were trying to push them too hard. So you really had to decide how much this person respected you and trusted you and just was listening to what you had to say. If they did like the film, if they were very enthusiastic about the film, then they actually would be quite welcoming to anything you could say about background, about what the director was doing, and anything that they could hear that would help them understand the film a little bit better. They already liked it. They just didn't know as much about it as I did. But the best way I can help you understand the way I approach these conversations is for me to tell you a story about something that happened to me when I was a teenager. When I was 16, I used to go to the Art Institute of Chicago. It was the best museum that was near where I lived in Madison, Wisconsin. And there was a collection there called the Helen Birch Bartlett Collection. That was my favorite. It had all these great famous paintings like Le Grand Jatte. So it was just on one floor you could see so much. But the painting that I was obsessed with was Picasso's The Old Guitarist, a blue period painting about a blind guitarist. And the reason I like this painting so much is that I could see the face of a woman hidden within it. And I just stared at it. And it was my discovery. I thought nobody had told me about this. This was just something I had seen by looking at it a lot. And I started to come up with theories like she was somebody that the old man knew and remembered. She could have been somebody that he had romantic feelings for. She could have been his mother. Now, you could tell me today that I was ridiculous. I was just a kid. There was no connection between this woman and the old guitarist. It's just that Picasso was poor when he made the blue period paintings and he didn't have the money to buy canvas. But now that I've told you that that woman is there, you'll never be able to not see her. And this was the essence of my approach to publicity. I would say to somebody, did you notice this thing that happened in this shot? Did you see this thing that was going on in the back of the shot, or this piece of music, or this little thing that happened in a performance? And the person would hear that and they would go, oh yes, I didn't notice that, but yes, that happened. And that wouldn't mean that they didn't think the film was crap, but they would say, yes, I see that. And sometimes, if I just kept working away, trying to give these little details, I'm just trying to push a little bit further with the film so that some people might go, I never really thought about that filmmaker that way. And these details give me something to be curious about, makes me see him as the kind of filmmaker who would put those things in that I didn't notice, that kind of attention to detail, that kind of artistic thinking, that style. And maybe they'll go, I'm going to go watch this movie again. Maybe I didn't think about it enough because there's a lot in there I missed. And that's what I did. It was the jumping into the mud puddle. It was learning and learning and learning about stuff and then talking about it with people who were willing to hear me and not going to dismiss me because I was the publicist. They were going to listen to what I want to say and then, either take it seriously or reject it. After I had these conversations with journalists, I would then talk to my clients. And the clients, it was the same thing. They would say, yes, I see that, or I know I don't see that, but have you thought about this? And I would learn from them because we all loved these films. We all cared about them. They cared about it enough to distribute these films. And sometimes I'd be talking to a critic quite often, and they would be much, much more perceptive than me. They would be profoundly more perceptive than me, and they would tell me things that I missed. And maybe they would know a lot more about the director because they'd seen more films or just understood those films better. And everything I heard, everything I learned from these conversations, I then incorporated them into future conversations. I loved my job so much because it allowed me to be in this world of film and loving film and talking about film. It was my community, all these people. After 7 years out on the road as a production publicist, I came back to New York to do the kind of work I loved, releasing movies, doing publicity for movies as they came out in New York. But when I got back, I discovered that a lot of things had changed. For one thing, I was being asked to write some memos that were very corporate, very formal, different from the way I had operated before. For example, they would ask me to call critics and write down exactly what they said. The script is subpar, the performances are weak. And you just wrote it down. While you're writing, you cannot talk. If you're trying to get the exact words somebody is saying, for me, I just shut down. They didn't need me and my skill set. What they needed was a robot, a dictation machine. I wasn't able to do my work for clients like this. They didn't get the full me. But you find things that you can do and try and get enjoyment and try and find creative things to do, even on projects like that. But to be quite honest, if I look back at all the years I worked as a publicist after coming back from my years away, the stuff that worked out well was the one for clients that they gave me autonomy. They gave me freedom. And eventually, after I closed my company, I became somebody who just did publicity writing. And this was an aspect of the publicity work that I really, really loved. So it was nice to have that little piece and to focus on it as something that I totally enjoyed. And right now, I'm making videos about my career, and I'm really loving that. And I thank you for listening to this one.